Saw dudes, with the launch of Season of Wishful Thinking, Severance Enclosure got buffed. Bungie buffed the size and damage of the explosion, and killing with the explosion will cause an additional explosion. It's essentially letting us splooge all over the place. This is a really nice buff, and while it doesn't align with an elemental affinity type, it plays very well into the exotic's identity. Today's build will double down on the explosive part of the exotic and make us damn near unkillable. We will also be making use of the recently buffed Edge of Action to provide even more team support. I'll stop yapping now and just get to it. Let's get started. Sentinel Shield was the super I chose to use because of one of the aspects that we will be using later on. It's really fun to use, but it doesn't provide the same level of support that Ward of Dawn does. If you don't want to use Sentinel Shield, feel free to use Ward of Dawn. Rally Barricade was my class ability of choice because it increases reload speed and because it has a lower cooldown. The additional reload speed helps out Edge of Action and our other weapons. Towering Barricade just feels redundant since we already have a glaive shield. Even though we are using a glaive, our melee choice is pretty important. I chose to use shield throw so that I could proc Severance Enclosure's explosions from range. The grenade is up to choice. I always like suppressor grenades because they can stun overload champions. However, vortex grenades will always serve as a good alternative for light crowd control. Today's aspects are going to be Controlled Demolition and Offensive Bulwark. Controlled Demolition causes void ability damage and volatile explosions to apply volatile to enemies. Volatile explosions heal us and our allies for 90 HP, which serves as our substitute for Devour since it was already nerfed. Offensive Bulwark grants Sentinel Shield an additional shield throw. While a Void Overshield is active, we receive 400% additional base grenade regen rate, 100% increased melee damage, and increased melee lunge range to 5.5 meters. The Splooge fragments are Echo of Cessation, Instability, Obscurity, and Undermining. Cessation causes finishers to apply volatile to enemies close by. Kills against volatile enemies spawn a Void Breach. Instability makes grenade kills grant volatile rounds to avoid weapons for 11 seconds. Obscurity causes finishers to grant us invisibility for 4.8 seconds. And finally, Echo of Undermining causes our grenades to apply weaken to enemies for 5 seconds. Let's cover the armor. First off, the helmet had Harmonic Siphon, Special Ammo Finder, and Dynamo. Dynamo can be swapped for Heavy Ammo Finder. On the gauntlets, Grenade Kickstart, Firepower, and Bolstering Detonation. For Severance Enclosure, I equip Concussive Dampener and 2 copies of Lucent Blades. 1 copy can be swapped for Harmonic Reserves. Boots-wise, there was Recuperation, Innervation, and Absolution. Finally, the mark had Proximity Ward, Reaper, and Bomber. Because this build focuses a lot on close quarters combat, I think having high resilience is key. We aren't using Devour anymore since it got nerfed, and we won't have full heal on demand. Controlled Demolition makes up for this a bit, but we won't have the same face tanking value. Proximity Ward will help soak up a lot more damage, giving us about 500 effective HP, but that shield wears off faster than you think. The next best stat to max would be Discipline for the lower grenade cooldown. Any leftover points can go into Strength to lower our shield throw cooldown. If you like splooging everywhere with Void, drop a sub. It helps me out a ton. Today's build has 2 weapon loadouts. Both have the same general playstyle but use different weapon types. I wanted to make sure that this build is accessible to as many players as possible. Feel free to skip around to find out what you like. Weapon loadout 1 uses Submission, Edge of Action, and either Regnant or Retrofit Escapade. This loadout takes advantage of the numerous glaive buffs this season while still making use of Severance Enclosure. Keep in mind that glaive melees do not proc Severance Enclosure's exotic perk. Submission is my favorite run and gun weapon. It lets us stray faster, does great damage up close, and provides healing via its Soul Drinker origin perk. Since each shot doesn't hit too hard, it allows us to whittle down enemies to prime them for finishers. We don't want to use a primary weapon that will outright kill enemies, nor do we want to use a primary that has a long time to kill. Submission is the perfect middle ground. It does great damage when used normally, but can easily bring enemies down to the finisher threshold so that we can proc Severance Enclosure's big splooge. I realize that Submission may not be everyone's cup of tea due to it being a raid weapon, so you can sub this out for pretty much anything. Just be aware that you do not always want to one-shot enemies. Edge of Action provides great support via the on-demand bubble. I love to use this glaive since the cover it grants comes in clutch. However, the main reason why I use it is for the Void Overshield. Since we are using Offensive Bulwark as one of our fragments, Void Overshields cause our basic melee attacks to fly volatile and increase our grenade regen rate. This makes it possible to proc Severance Enclosure's perk without having to use a shield throw or a finisher. Even though this is possible, I would still recommend using a finisher to proc the exotic perk since it's generally safer. With the bubbles active, I would recommend luring enemies to the edge. It'll keep you safe and provide cover when you need it the most. Regnant is a perfect ad clear and boss DPS weapon. I like the fact that volatile rounds double the amount of explosions. The explosions heal us and provide extra damage. They also are supplemented by various weapon perks like Explosive Light and Spike Grenades. I like using Regnant after placing down a bubble from Edge of Action. The best role in my eyes is Quick Launch, Spike Grenades, Auto-Loading Holster, and Explosive Light. The second option is Retrofit Escapade, of course. I bet none of you losers expected this. Alright, I'm glazing a little, but this gun fits perfectly with the build. The volatile rounds provided by Echo of Instability pair perfectly with 4 times charm and target lock. Like Regnant, this gun performs double duty in the boss DPS and crowd control departments. I will say that this gun takes a very long time to empty, so it may not be optimal for short-term DPS phases. The best roll is corkscrew rifling, appended mag, 4 times a charm, and target lock. Be sure to use a backup mag mod to get the most out of this weapon. Weapon Loadout 2 uses Partner Dust, Age-Old Bond, and Leviathan's Breath. Since this loadout does not use a glaive, switch out the Lucent Blades mods for more resistance mods. Pardon Dust is our crowd control tool, which I find necessary since we are losing out on glaives as our damage resistance source. Disorienting grenades prevents enemies from taking offensive action, which is great. It makes them easy targets for Severance Enclosure's explosions and takes a lot of heat off of us. I appreciate being able to have this at my beck and call. The role I used was Quick Launch, Disorienting Grenades, Auto-Loading Holster, and Vorpal Weapon. Age-Old Bond is a preferred ad-clear weapon. The usual perk combo is Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds. This is fine for the build, but we already have Echo of Instability and other means of applying the volatile debuff. For that reason, I would choose a different perk in the 4th column. My personal preference is Target Lock or Golden Tricorn. Target Lock only requires that we land shots, which we should be doing already. Golden Tricorn requires us to get a weapon kill, then an ability kill. I know it's really hard to do. With how easily we can achieve this option remains completely viable. Try out some different perk combos and use what you prefer. On a side note, Optative and Lithophobia are craftable void primaries that just released. If you like those weapons, use those instead. Lastly, we come to Gojo the Divided One's favorite weapon, Leviathan's Garlic Breath. This baby is the big chonker and does tons of damage, and it just got a really nice ornament. Honestly, I don't know if I need to explain myself any more than I already have. It does superb boss damage, can clear groups easily due to its large AoE explosion, and is a blast to use. My biggest complaint is that the initial draw is slow, but that's just fixed by the catalyst, which makes it fire basically twice as fast. This is our final explosion source of the build, but meshes perfectly with the overall theme and performance. The volatile explosions heal us and allies via controlled demolition, and prime any nearby enemies for finishers, repeating Severance Enclosure's loop. Finally, let's go over the game loop. All you gotta do is either kill stuff with melee abilities or finishers to make use of Severance Enclosure. I prefer finishers because they allow us to go invisible and apply volatile to a large group without needing to waste an ability. Get enemies low enough to finish them. While invisible, move to a safe position and select the next enemy that you want to send into the afterlife. After selecting the breedable ad or champion, proceed to whittle them down to the finisher threshold and perform a Mortal Kombat fatality on them. Keep repeating this process using your weapons to clean up anyone else who remains. Use your barricade and edge of actions bubble to keep yourself safe, and if ads begin to pile up, use your grenade and shield throw to thin the crowd. Rinse and repeat. I'm super glad that Severance Enclosure got a buff. I love that they doubled down on the explosive aspect. I didn't think that Bungie would buff this exotic since they expressed interest in Mask of the Quiet One, which now seems like the least favorite child in a broken family. That's besides the point though. Severance Enclosure works perfectly now. The double explosions are hilarious and help clear ads and deal some pretty decent damage to majors. It's a good change and I'm excited to see where this build goes throughout the season. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and as always, thank you for watching and happy farming. Enjoy the rest of the season.